All right, and we are live. 3, 2, 1. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome to the Ummahpreneur live podcast, your favorite podcast where I interview Muslim entrepreneurs at the top of their game. And in this very special episode, I have with me none other than Idil Issa. Idil, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
So just to introduce Idil, guys, Idil is an advocate, she's a writer, and she's a public speaker. So she does a lot of things, and she has extensive experience in using media communications to advance causes with social impact. And believe it or not, she has even testified here in Canada against Bill 21 at the Canadian National Assembly hearing, a bill which prevents religious symbols such as the hijab from being worn by public workers. So she's really active in defending the rights of oppressed groups on issues including race, religion, and gender. And she really works hard to also defend the rights of Muslim women. So I wanted to bring her on this podcast to get a little overview of her journey as an entrepreneur and how she became this voice of justice for Muslim women and for other oppressed groups, how she became this person and what we can learn from that journey. So I'm really excited to dive into all this with you, Adil. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks. Sorry for all the camera shifts. So I was in a good position.
It's all good. That's usually how these things go. This is live, guys, so it's always raw. It's always unedited. This is how we do it. But I'm really happy that you joined us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So, Idil, the first question that we ask every single one of our guests, and I think it's the best way to start any conversation, it's, can you tell us a little bit of your journey and your story that you went through that inspired you to become an entrepreneur, that inspired you to start, being this advocate that fights for the rights of others?
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting question. I would say that the impulse to become an activist was very early on. So my mother is actually a professor. She teaches sociology at Carleton University in Ottawa.
Okay.
And as she was raising me, she very much was politically aware, would bring me to protests even, made sure that I knew about different things happening. Like when I was young, I knew about some of the mining the abuses being perpetrated by Canadian mining companies in South America. She kept me aware of what was happening in the world. So I would say that it definitely was something that was taught to me by my mother. My mother definitely included me in her research and would talk to me. She definitely was my first introduction to advocacy and activism. And then I would say in my school years, so in high school, I started to get involved. So there was an African club in my high school, which was a club that promoted the interests of students of African origin, because, given the legacy and history of slavery on the continent, there's definitely some historical injustices and some just issues that students from those backgrounds are dealing with.
Yeah.
So I was a part of that club, and I just kept involved in university. I got involved in my school's Muslim Students Association, so that was at McGill. And I also was involved in the Black Student Network. So I always kept involved. Definitely, university, as so many of us know, is a very challenging and demanding time in our lives.
Yeah.
But I always kept like a time slot or lots of time available for that work. And I think it's very important. It's something that I encourage everybody to do. And not to just get involved in clubs that are kind of aligned with our religious convictions, so the Muslim Students Association, but to get involved in other clubs as well, clubs that are working on issues that you care about. So whether you're an environmentalist, whether you care about the environment, or whether you're interested in animal rights, anything that really you feel speaks to you is something that I encourage you to get involved in. I think it's so important that we all do something to contribute to not only our business and our self-fulfillment, but also our community. I think that's very important.
100%. And, you mentioned an interesting point, which is you kind of grew up in that environment with your mother. So you were already influenced by her activism herself and her drive to do this. And then it infected you and it became a drive within you, which is beautiful to see. After you went through school and you joined all these clubs and you kind of got involved in all of these different causes and these different communities and groups that were active in, fighting for the rights of oppressed people and trying to advance social change in a positive way. What did you do once you got out of that education system and you got out of these groups? Did you then kind of build your own, or did you gravitate towards others that were outside of the school system, for example?
So yeah, I'll give you guys a trajectory of what I did, because it's
Sure.
definitely non-traditional. So when I finished, here, let me start at the beginning to tell you guys. So I went to McGill. I was a very elite student. Like, I had 8 scholarships, including a national scholarship. And so I got to McGill on a full ride, and I was
Awesome.
studying in the sciences. So I initially was thinking of maybe studying medicine.
Okay.
So I did my first year sciences. I did very well, but then I started to major in microbiology and immunology, and that's where I had a hard stop. I was like, I just don't like this degree at all.
Right.
It's the sort of degree where they hand you a textbook and you just have to memorize the entire thing, and it just didn't fit with me.
Yeah.
I ended up switching to political science and philosophy. So I completed my degree in philosophy and political science. I worked for a bit for the government in Ottawa.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So in a federal office. But then after that initial contract out of university, I started to travel. So I think my first contract abroad was in Qatar. And they had this education city. They had a lot of American universities opening up campuses there. And so they were trying to hire a lot of people to kind of help get these institutions off the ground. So I worked for Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service there. And I was in the communications department. So I definitely built a career in communications. After Qatar, I worked in Malaysia. So I was working for startups, for social enterprises, which at the time was relatively new. I think the idea was, okay, either you're going to create an institution that's for profit, or you're going to create a nonprofit. But this new concept of, okay, a lot of nonprofits are having difficulty getting grants. You have to reapply every year. You have to justify your expenses. Sometimes it can be a hindrance.
Yeah.
So a lot of social enterprises were starting to look at, okay, how do we create a revenue stream for our other activities? We want to donate to the community. We want to have, weekly, we want to give food to the community every week to homeless people. How do we create a revenue stream to pay for that? And so that's what I was kind of getting in the middle of, or just at the start of. And it was quite interesting to see. A lot of companies were starting to say, okay, we wanted to have this, we have this social mission, but we also want to have a revenue stream to support it. Other concepts like triple bottom line were coming into play, where companies were looking at developing other bottom lines or goals other than just profit. So that's kind of the scene I was involved in. It's a very exciting scene. I definitely encourage people to get involved with startups. And I'll tell you why. So the reason why, as young Muslim entrepreneurs, you should get involved in startups and in the startup world is because, first of all, it's very exciting. It's very fun. So if you want to get involved with the business world and you want to get your feet wet, it's a great way. Second of all, those teams are usually very small. So if you're looking at the beginning of your career to really expand your skill set and really just dive into a certain industry, it's a great way, because I remember for certain startups I was working at, I was the only person in communications. So I was the marketing director, I was the writer, I was the social media manager, I was everything. Yeah. And so it really allowed me to develop like international level skills in communications, because for these small startups, I was doing everything.
Yeah.
It's a really, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because that's usually the startup world, is because you're kind of short on resources. You have to tap into so many different activities and fields as one person, because you just don't have the resources to hire a person for every single thing you need to do.
Absolutely. And so, you can definitely use it to your advantage. You can say, okay, you know what, I'm really interested in getting involved in a startup, involved with the environment, so sustainability. Maybe you want to work for a company that transforms used goods into goods that can be used again.
Yeah.
So this is one way to do it. Instead of looking at a really established company, which is looking for people with a certain skill set or certain number of years of experience, try out a startup that can actually let you in the door. They're happy to have you because they can't pay you much, and then you get that experience, and then you move on, inshallah, to other things.
Inshallah, that's amazing. Can you tell me a little bit about how you actually ended up in Malaysia? Was it something that you were personally seeking out, or did you just maybe get an offer, or someone maybe found you on LinkedIn, or did they reach out, or did you say, I want to go to Malaysia, I want to experience what it's like to be in Malaysia, and so let me find something there? Because I know, from the people that have went, it's a beautiful country filled with Muslims, so it's definitely somewhere that we would be comfortable. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I'll paint a picture for you all, because Malaysia is a wonderful place, especially for Muslim entrepreneurs. It's definitely a Muslim country. So you're going to find all your restaurants are halal, so you can eat, very easily. Even the fast food chains are halal, so I'm not saying you should eat fast food. But it's a very easy entry point into Asia, the Asian market, and it's a hub in Asia. So if you want to do business in Asia, Malaysia is a perfect place. The amenities are also quite modern. It's sometimes we have an impression in North America that in the East things are maybe different, but no, the amenities are very modern. So the way I went there, I don't recommend this. In my 20s, I did some crazy things. So you shouldn't do exactly how I did it. But initially, after my contract in Qatar, I was actually going to Thailand because my friend recommended this retreat. So it was mainly a vacation. And then since I was in Thailand, I had some university friends from Malaysia. I said, well, I'm in the neighborhood, let me just go visit them. Yeah. And then one of those friends, so a friend of a friend, was starting up a social enterprise, and she knew I was a communications expert. She said, can you help me launch this? And so I said, yes, I'll do it. So it was supposed to be just a couple months, and then one thing turned into another. I ended up spending 2 years in Malaysia. Wow, I'm not saying you should do it that way, but it's what happened to me. And Malaysia is wonderful. I think, like I said, it's definitely a hub in Asia. It's a Muslim country, but it has a really interesting way that it's dealt with modernity. So it has a very healthy relationship, I think, to modernity. Okay. How it maintains its traditions, but also is a great place for business. So I worked for social enterprises, I worked for startups in that place, and I was able to travel a bit. So I went to Singapore as well, which is a great place for business. So it's definitely a wonderful experience for me.
That's amazing, mashallah. And I think that's kind of like the best way to travel and do it. Because a lot of people think like, man, I want to travel, I want to get out there, I want to explore the world, but I have a job and, I have all these things. And it's like, okay, why not, go and actually use it as a way to make money and, start a certain temporary life there. Or at least, you're going there, but you're actually benefiting from your trip in different ways because you actually have a working relationship there. So it's definitely possible. And I think it's one of the best ways to travel, where you, instead of going for a week or two to many different places, you go for a few months and you actually take in the culture. Maybe you work a little bit there with the startup or a company, and you make some money while you're there too. So why not? I think it's a beautiful way to do it. Now, what made you decide to come back to Montreal? Because if I was in Malaysia, I don't know if I'd be tempted to come back here. There's a lot of rain. Today it's raining. It's a bit dark. And there's a lot of snow as well. So what tempted you to come back to Montreal?
Right. So after I spent a couple of years in Malaysia working for startups, for social enterprises, I came back to Canada for a bit, but then I traveled again. So I actually moved to Johannesburg for a couple of years. And that was an amazing experience. So I worked for the African Leadership Network, which is a network in Africa of African leaders who are aiming to contribute and do positive work in the continent. So these are business leaders, these are politicians, these are people who've had a certain level of personal success and then want to join together to be able to do something for Africa. So I was managing communications for the network. So that's the networking group on the continent. And there was also a university that was launched. So they're really trying to prevent brain drain a lot of Africa's best and brightest, they go to Harvard, they go to Oxford, they go to Cambridge, and then sometimes they end up working abroad. So this university is really trying to stop that. It's trying to create elite institutions on the continent so that people are tempted to study in Africa and then stay there, work there, and contribute to the continent for historical reasons, colonialism, all sorts of things. There is poverty in Africa. And so this organization was really attempting to create a pathway for people to stay in Africa and create positive change.
That's beautiful. That's actually amazing. How, when you left, what stage were they at? Like, what were they actually working on? Was this institution in place? Were they starting to attract students? What stage was this at when you went?
So there is a campus, there's an academy. So I guess it's a high school level equivalent to Canada in Johannesburg. There's also a university already established. I think it's undergraduate in Mauritius. And there is an MBA program, so a business school in Rwanda. I think they're looking at opening something in Nigeria, Lagos next. But it's definitely, I was working directly for the founders, Fred Swanaker and Achaleke. They're on the Forbes list. They're really doing big things in Africa. And I think that's something interesting. You know, a lot of us are the children of immigrants, the children of refugees. And you know, sometimes that can be, there's a stigma around that. You know, we're portrayed as being somehow disadvantaged in Canadian society, but you can flip that. You can really look at that as an advantage. You have a connection to another country, another continent, another culture. And despite what the media and the news might say, there's a lot of interesting business opportunities and, you know, things happening in those countries. So maintaining that connection is good.
100%. And really, I think what you mentioned is really the thing that they should be focusing on, which is the talent that grows in this country, or in that country, and really the brightest minds tend to leave, right? Because they see opportunity elsewhere. And I think just by fixing that problem, then you can bring so much positive impact to the country and the continent itself by having these people stay there and work to making that a better place, inshallah. So I think it's an amazing cause. I think it's very effective, and it's a smart way of going about it, honestly. It's a very intelligent way of doing that. Now, Idil, you then ended up coming back to Canada, and of course, from what I know, you also featured on major TV channels here in Canada. You ended up speaking on CBC, on CTV, and you were advocating for social causes. You even were present at the national hearing for Bill 21, which, you know, not every single person can go be like, hey, I want to be president. So you had a way to get your voice heard. How did you go about doing that? And what was that like? Can you share with us the journey behind that?
So yeah, during my travels, I always kept kind of one foot in Canadian politics because it's something I'm very passionate about. So even while I was abroad, I would write op-eds, I would, you know, follow the news, I would see what was going on. And so, and I knew eventually I would come back to Canada because I love Canada. I was born here, raised here, and I knew that this is where I belonged. So I always had that plan. I'm going to come back. And so when I did come back, I definitely knew that I had to get involved with some of these bills that were being used to discriminate against Muslim women. You know, it's for me, it was unacceptable. You know, decades ago, there were universities who discriminated against Black people, against Jews, not allowing them to study. And for me, it was equivalent, you know, the idea that teachers in Quebec are not allowed to wear a hijab. For me, it's just very discriminatory. So I knew I had to do something. And I was able to reach out to the province's biggest women's organization, so the FFQ, Fédération des Femmes du Québec. And I knew that, or I had a hunch that they were going to be asked to speak at parliamentary hearings on Bill 21. Now, the ruling government in Quebec is the Coalition Avenir Québec, and they're very determined to push through their agenda. So I knew that the consultations that they would host wouldn't necessarily be to kind of like hear different viewpoints. I knew it was kind of just an exercise in PR maybe, but they were really determined to put through this law. But I knew that they would have to invite the Fédération des Femmes du Québec because it's the largest women's organization in the province and they couldn't really overlook them. So I actually, a journalist at Le Devoir had a list of the people who would be invited to hearings. And I actually looked at the list. Somebody sent me a copy, and I actually contacted the woman who was heading up the Fédération des Femmes du Québec. And I said, listen, you've been invited to speak. Can you share time with me? And she didn't even know that they had been invited. So I had scooped her.
Wow.
I had found out the story before her, and I had shared it with her. And so because I had, found out that information and shared it with her, and of course, as a nonprofit, they're very short-staffed. They don't have a lot of people to do the necessary work. She said, okay, do you want to co-write the brief that we have to present? And I said, yeah, sure. And she said, okay, we'll share time with you.
Amazing.
And so she was granted 10 minutes, an audience of 10 minutes at the Assemblée Nationale, the parliament here in Quebec. And she shared 5 of those minutes with me.
Amazing. And just to kind of give people who are listening who might not be in Canada, we have a lot of listeners from the UK, from the US. Bill 21, essentially, this is a bill that the government has put in place over the recent years, which has affected not only Muslim women, but people of other religious backgrounds, because it essentially prevents all religious symbols from being worn in public spaces by public workers. So that includes teachers or any other public worker that provides public services. So if you work privately for a private company, then you are still allowed to wear the hijab. That is determined by that private company. But if you work for the public or for the government, if you represent the government in any shape or form, then you are prevented from wearing religious symbols. And that includes wearing the hijab, which, as we know, it's not really the same thing as like wearing a necklace with a cross on it, right? It's a different situation for us and a different scenario. And so Sister Idil here actually went and found out what was going to happen with these hearings to see if she could get in and have her voice be heard as a Muslim woman, which is amazing, because really what your story goes to show is that if you want to get access to a certain situation, or if you want to get access to maybe even a certain person, you want to get into a meeting with someone that you want to talk to, or you want to pitch your idea, or you even want to, for example, get access to something like a national hearing inside of Canada, all you really have to do is go and get all the information you can on what's happening with that situation, with that person, with that scenario, and see if you can find an opening somehow where you can position yourself advantageously to someone in that scenario. So, for example, Idil went and saw that this group, the Femmes du Québec, right, that you worked with, they were going to have the opportunity to speak at this national hearing. And she realized they're a nonprofit. They might not have as many staff as they need to. Let me reach out and see if I can maybe give a helping hand. So it was a win-win for both sides. And so that's really how it works. It's when it's a win-win situation, people are more likely to accept your offer and let you into their world, or their exclusive meetings, or whatever pitch you want to do to a certain investor that's hard to reach. This is how you kind of get in. It's always within win-win situations through other people. So that's just an amazing testament to that ideal, and honestly a very clever way for you to actually get in and get your voice to be heard. And that's really what it takes, because comparatively to someone that just maybe, let's say, learned about this and says, I want to go there and I want to speak up, but then it's just kind of like a passing thought, and they think, oh, I'm against this bill, and this is not right for us. But then what do they do about it, right? And 90% of people, they don't really do much about it. They just think in their minds, oh, this is not right for us, and then they move on. But you actually went and you took the steps necessary to make something happen and to actually see if you could contribute, which is honestly more than 90% of the world can say. And that's why I really wanted to bring you on to just share what that experience is like and what that story is like, to hopefully inspire other people to do the same, inshallah, and to give people a background of you as a person, because people might think, well, she's a one of a kind. This is not something that I can do. Tell us a little bit about, I want to get a preview of you in high school. You when you were a young woman, and you said you were being influenced by your mother's activism, and you were a bit of a younger gal. Did you have this drive to fight for justice? And did you always have something in you where you felt like you were different? You were unique in some way? Did you ever get into an experience where you realized, this is not what my other friends are doing, or this is not something that other people necessarily gravitate to? Did you have any of those experiences in high school? Did you feel that you were different in any shape or form?
Did I feel I was different? I think in high school, I was like all of us, we're in high school, in Canada at least. I'm the daughter of Somali refugees. I'm trying to negotiate between my mother's culture and then what I see around me in high school. At that age, you definitely are looking for validation from your peers.
Yeah.
So I definitely experienced that. I don't want to claim to anyone or have anyone think that I was immune from that somehow. No, I definitely was not. But I think that I just had and maybe this is partly from my religious upbringing, because justice is very important in Islam. There's definitely a sense in me of a love for justice and fairness. And there was a level of courage, I guess, or ability to kind of take that feeling of a love of justice and fairness and act on it. So I think that was always there. I think as I became older, I was able to refine my responses and be more effective in how I responded. But I think my love of justice, my love of fairness, and my desire to speak out or do something about it was always there. And I think that's all we can ever do, is really just refine our responses, be more effective. And I want to give a teaching lesson too, because I know this group is geared towards Muslim entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
There's a very important principle of finding common cause. I think we're in a context in North America and in different countries in the so-called West where we may not share the same values as all of our peers. But I think it's important to identify the areas which you do agree with others, because in order to achieve your aims, you will need to find common cause with people. Like, I'll give you an example. The woman who heads up the FFQ, the Women's Federation in Quebec, who I partnered with, is a transgender woman. And I think that a lot of the official lobby groups in Canada who are fighting for Muslim women may not have thought initially or instinctively to partner with this person.
Yeah.
But if you have a deep understanding of politics, of the lay of the land in Quebec, about who the power brokers are, who's in government, and who they're listening to, then you're going to understand the chess pieces and who you need to partner with to achieve your aim. So I think it's very important for us to understand that as Muslims, we have certain values, certain things that we do, certain, religious convictions, but it's important not to sacrifice those values whatsoever in any way, shape, or form, but to try and figure out, okay, with my peers who may not be Muslim, what do we have in common that we can work together on to achieve a good aim?
Yeah. 100%. And that's really where we are able to make the biggest difference, because there's kind of like that saying where you basically, one drop in the pond doesn't make much of a difference. It makes a very small ripple, but then you pour a giant jug of water and then it just creates a bigger ripple. And then you pour, let's say, metric tons of water, and it becomes waves splashing out. And that's really the difference between one person, one drop, and then, a whole community of people that are fighting against something. There's a huge difference in the amount of ripples that you're going to make and the amount of waves that you're going to make with what you're trying to achieve. So yourself, you went and you found that, this is not something that I can do on my own. This is not a fight that I can fight on my own, and I'm going to need help. And who are other people who also maybe feel the way that I feel in different ways, and they're being impacted in different ways. And even in terms of Bill 21, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just Muslim women. There's, Sikhs that wear head turbans also that are affected, Jews who wear the kippah. So there's other communities that are being affected as well, and that also want to fight this bill. And it doesn't make sense for us not to partner and see how we can all come together to try to fight this, because it impacts us all together. And I think that's really when we can be the most powerful and cause the most waves. So Idil, I have a question for you here, and it's in terms of your speaking and your presentation. Now, a lot of people, let's say, they might be hearing this, they might be thinking, your story is amazing, and all the things that you can get into, they just wish they could do that. And every person can, really, but then they might have some insecurity in regards to, well, I'm not really a good speaker. I'm not really confident that I can go on there and, say what I have to say in an eloquent way. So in terms of your speaking presentation skills, mashallah, yours are very refined. How did you go about developing that? How did you become a better speaker, someone who could really, how do you say, formulate their words in a way where everyone understands, and it's very clear and it's very well done.
Mhm. So I'll tell you how my journey went,
Yeah.
but it could be different for other people. Other people arrive at these skills in different ways. For me, my mother was a professor,
Yeah.
so she had a PhD in philosophy. She had a very advanced grasp of the English language, and just philosophy, history. Like I was raised on like European art house films and all sorts of things. My mom would bring me to museums, expose me to culture, different cultures. And at a young age, I would read English literature, Shakespeare, all sorts of things. And I mentioned that because I think the way that I really learned how to communicate at an expert level is from reading. So
Amazing.
just reading as much as possible,
Mm.
whether you're reading the New Yorker, the Walrus, the New York Times, the Montreal Gazette. I'm in Montreal. Whether you're reading the Globe and Mail, I think it's so important to just read as much as possible, because it's not even having read the whole book. It's just that nugget that you're going to find within that book, an anecdote, a fact, something that you can use while speaking 10 years later. So that's how I really did it. Is I just read copious amounts of material, all different types, and it just gives me a pool to pull from that other people just don't have. Like,
Mm.
not everyone's read Greek philosophy, but I
Yeah.
have. Not everyone has read Shakespeare, but I have. And I think if you want to speak at that elite level in an English context, a lot of people have. This is why there's some undergraduate programs which are based on the great books. So they have a series of 100 books that they ask the students to read,
Okay.
because it really is the foundation of our Western system of thought. You have to be familiar with Plato. You have to be familiar with Shakespeare. There's certain references that, like, if you, for example, read the Globe and Mail, the New York Times, if you haven't read those things, there's certain references that you just will not understand.
Yeah.
But if you have, you will understand them. And so it just creates a more polished output. So that would be my first recommendation: read as much as possible,
Amazing.
and then speak about things that you're passionate about. So if you are passionate about a certain subject, that's what you should gravitate towards. So trying to speak in a compelling way about something that doesn't really speak to you, it's going to be more difficult.
Yeah.
So whether that's animal rights, whether it's in the environment, whether it's whatever topic you're passionate about, speaking about something that you're passionate about is going to infuse your speech with just energy, and it's going to get people to listen to you.
Yeah.
That's what I would say as an initial tip.
And that's amazing advice. And when you say read, I think the importance is to highlight, guys, like, we're not talking about reading your Facebook newsfeed here. We're not talking about reading Twitter. We're talking about reading actual works of that contain a high level of English, right? When you mention things like Shakespeare, things like Greek philosophy and Plato, these, the way these books are written, it's written in a very high level of English, and it uses certain words that you might not generally see people use in their everyday interactions. And so it increases your vocabulary, level of your richness of vocabulary. And it, as you mentioned, increases your repertoire of, maybe ideas, thoughts, metaphors, words that you can refer to and then pull from while you're speaking. And that just naturally helps you become a better speaker, and as well being passionate. A lot of speakers also recommend, I want to get your opinion on this, they recommend joining things like Toastmasters or other speaking groups where they get to practice. Is it something that you did personally, or do you recommend this at all?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was in university, I actually got involved in the debating society, which was
Okay.
a lot of fun. And I think what that helps you develop is rhetorical skills, so rhetoric. And rhetoric is very important because basically you use it to try and convince your audience, right?
Mm.
So it helps you to learn how to structure an argument. It helps you to interact with somebody else who has an opposing viewpoint. So it's very useful. And one of the great things about it is you get shifted from one side of an argument to another. So it helps you to strengthen your counter arguments, because on one day you're arguing for a proposition, but on the other day you're arguing against it. So it really helps you to sharpen up in terms of seeing the other point of view and what those arguments are, and to be able to counter them. So yeah, I was definitely involved in the debating union. I know there's Toastmasters. I haven't really been involved in that club or
Okay.
group, but whichever is easily available to you or accessible to you, whether it's a debating society, whether it's Toastmasters, whatever venue, there's a lot of local TED Talks and local venues where you can actually speak. And so exploring that is interesting. Always, start in a way that you feel comfortable, and then go from there.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And to someone that's listening to this and like, all right, got it. This is how I need to practice my speaking presentation skills. Now I'm ready to go out there. Now I'm ready to start, having my voice be heard. Just like Idil, I'm inspired. I want to do this. What's the best way for someone who also wants to advocate for, rights for their communities, for their people, or for social causes, to have their voice be heard? How do they go about doing this? Now, you have, of course, an extensive journey where, you were throughout your entire life part of different groups, and you ended up, within this field. But for someone that's from the outside looking in, is there any advice on how they can get started, how they can really just see how they can contribute more to their communities, to certain groups that they might feel that they want to help?
Mm-hmm. So there's really great ways to start to get involved. So there's so many nonprofit groups in every single jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And if there's nothing in your area, you can go online and find, a group like Amnesty International that you can get involved with. But I think, small things like my writing career started, I used to write letters to the editor. So I would read an article that made me upset, or evoked some emotions in me, and I would write a letter to the editor. And editors will actually run some of them. So they'll read all the letters they get, and they will actually publish some of them. So that was a boost as a very young woman, a teenager, seeing, okay, my name is in the Globe and Mail, maybe not for an article, but I have this little letter to the editor that I've written and that they've published. So those are some small ways you can get involved. You can sign petitions. Organizations, nonprofits are always looking for volunteers, so you can always start by volunteering. Write op-eds, write letters to the editor, sign petitions. There's so many great ways to create and launch petitions as well, change.org and different online platforms. Yeah. So I would say, start local, start small. And, as Muslim entrepreneurs, I would also encourage you to have social bottom lines as well. So as you have a profit bottom line, look at, okay, how can we also contribute to our community and incorporate that into our mission as well?
Yeah, that's a huge one. And I'm partnered in an e-commerce brand. We develop wooden sunglasses, but part of that mission is for every sale, we plant a tree. So for every sale that we make, we plant a tree. And it could be something as simple as that, where even in my marketing agency, I'm partnered with the nonprofit, which I believe their name was Water. I have to double check again, but it's essentially a nonprofit where every time you donate, what they're going to do is they're going to build a water well somewhere that they don't have access to water very much. And so it could be something as simple as this. No matter what you do, marketing agency, e-commerce, online store, whatever it is, you can very easily add a social cause to it. You can add an aspect to it where you're giving back. And not only does that give you barakah in your business, right? We all know as Muslims, it's going to give you more blessing in your business, but also the Prophet ﷺ clearly tells us that when you give in charity, that money is never gone. It actually adds to your wealth. So I think even, for someone even listening to this and thinking, I don't have necessarily the time to go out and advocate in these ways, there are other ways that we can contribute. One of them being, as you mentioned, adding a social bottom line to your business, adding something as simple as, for every sale that you make, donate a small percentage to a nonprofit that you like, donate, a small percentage to a certain cause that you want to support, or maybe plant a tree for every product sold, something as simple as that. And it usually doesn't cost very much. And at least you feel like you're making a difference. And I think even as consumers right now, we are slowly gravitating more towards businesses that have a purpose, towards businesses that don't just exist for profit. People are starting to get a little bit tired of that. They're getting tired of businesses that just want to make profit for the sake of making profit. And a lot of businesses are catching on to this. Some of the big businesses, unfortunately, they're catching on, and they're running marketing ploys which aren't necessarily sincere to try to, grab onto this trend. But it is a shift that is happening in terms of consumer behavior. And it's something that we can, tailor to as entrepreneurs. And it will bring us a lot of benefit, not only in this dunya, but also in the hereafter by, doing something good through the money that we earn, inshallah. So just wanted to, express my support to that idea and give you guys some ideas on how you can go about this. Now, Idil, we've been talking about different topics for the last 40 minutes. And mashallah, we've explored so many different ideas. And I think already it's been such a value-packed episode, but I want to know a little bit more about you now. What's your vision? What do you have in store for your future as an entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as I've encouraged you all to read as much as you can, and to enrich your mind, I'm reapplying for graduate studies. I'm really trying to always level up and improve. So that I'm doing that currently.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also looking at, this is one of the reasons why I took this interview, because I'm also looking at entrepreneurship, right?
Amazing.
So I think when you're working in the nonprofit sector, when you're passionate about a cause, you really prioritize that cause. And over the years, I really have. I've focused on just delivering value and trying to create social impact. But especially as I want to talk to the Muslim woman for a little bit, as Muslim women, there's certain barriers we experience in our careers because of how we dress or our religious convictions, at least in the West, so-called West. And so I think it's really important to look at entrepreneurship as a very important way to, if not level the playing field, then to kind of achieve our goals. Because if you are equally skilled as somebody else in the same field, you won't necessarily have the same career advancement that you deserve. And that's just a really harsh reality. So I encourage you to look at entrepreneurship. I am, for many reasons, because, what I learned from social entrepreneurships, if you are really passionate about something, you really have to look at revenue streams to be able to pour into that cause.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that as well. I'm taking a step back actually from public interviews for a short period, for a time period. I get regular requests to be a member of boards for nonprofits and other organizations. I've declined many of them since COVID began because I am working on myself. I'm leveling up. I'm trying to learn. So yes, I do project a very polished image. It's very much intentional. It's very much because when you're going into that arena, and for example, myself, you're facing off against the Minister of Justice. You cannot show fear. You cannot show fear. You cannot show. You have to know the subject extremely well, and you have to project an image which is very professional. But behind that, I definitely feel like for myself and for many people in the public eye, there is a time period to step back, to press that reset button, to learn, to upskill, and to come out even better. So that's kind of my current trajectory right now.
That's amazing, mashallah. And we spoke before this podcast a little bit about what it takes to achieve a certain vision as an entrepreneur. And before we dive into that, I just wanted to address the vision behind Ummahpreneur, even and this brand that we're creating, this podcast that we run, and all the programs that we have, is really to actualize what you've just mentioned, which is to bring more power to Muslim entrepreneurs. Because I feel that through entrepreneurship, and this is really the driving force behind this brand, that through entrepreneurship, we can then regain control of our lives, of the decisions that we make with our money, and as well to become in more powerful positions where we can have a higher impact. Because, when it comes to building your business, when it comes to becoming an entrepreneur, and inshallah, you become successful and you grow a successful company, and you make lots of money. And some people might frown about that. Oh, you don't make, but the thing is, you can't do much when you have money. And you mentioned it yourself, like, what are you going to do when you don't have money? Again, can you donate? You can't donate to charity if you don't have money. You can't, support causes that you want to support if you don't have money. You can't, pay for your food and your lodging while you go and fight for social causes if you don't have money. It's an essential part of living life on this earth. And the truth is, the more money you have, the more power that you have. And it's just the system that we live in. And so as Muslims, if we become entrepreneurs, if we grow successful businesses, if we, build ourselves in a way where we can achieve these positions of power in our communities, then we can start to have more of a say. Right? People are going to listen a little bit more when we speak. People are going to want to pay attention to the things that we care about. And that's just going to cause a shift in, what's happening all around us. And the reason why I believe people, feel like they can take advantage of Muslims and they can always, release all these bills and that go against Muslim women and unfortunately advance all these causes that are oppressing our communities, is because we don't have a voice, is because we don't have any power in our community, is because, the people that actually do have power don't really care, right? So this is why it's so important. And this is the driving force behind Ummahpreneur. It's to create Muslim entrepreneurs, because if we have more entrepreneurs in the Muslim community, we have more people that have control over their lives, that have control over their income, and that have the power to support causes that they want to support, to make a difference, and to really, say that, no, listen, I contribute in my own way. And I'm an active citizen, and, I'm employing other citizens here, and I'm making a difference. And I don't support what you're doing as a government, and that's going to make a big difference versus someone, who isn't doing much in their societies to contribute, then why would they listen to them? And that's just a huge thing. And it's something I feel strongly about. So I apologize for going off on a tangent, but I just wanted to express my what I thought in regards to what you said. But that being said, Idil, we talked a little bit before this podcast on focus, on having a certain amount of certainty to be able to achieve something. And I think, for Muslim entrepreneurs listening to this, what is the biggest advice that we can give them when it comes to focus, when it comes to certainty, to really help them achieve their goals, to help them move forward when they might feel like they're not strong enough, or they're being challenged, or they're facing a lot of failures?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in my own experience and in my journey to this date, till today, I really have been able to, and this is personal, so this is how I've done it. I really do rely on Allah. I think that my faith has been crucial to my journey. I think that taking on the Minister of Justice, who's a member of the ruling party, is not something you can do if you don't have a certain level of trust and certainty. And my certainty doesn't come from self-confidence. It really doesn't. I know that, there's a certain deal offered to us by Allah. If this, then that. So by relying on Allah, I'm able to do things that seem out of reach. And this has just been my personal experience. Having faith has allowed me to have a level of certainty that's not based on my own skills and my own competencies, but based on my trust in God. So that's really, honestly, how it's worked out for me. I think that keeping up a daily wird of Quran, of dhikr, is something that I do, keeping my prayers. I think that these things, we feel like we're living in a very modern times, very rational times, but I think that these things give me a peace of mind. They give me a certain level of reliance, and it allows me to face big challenges, because there are huge challenges that you'll face as an entrepreneur. You could go bankrupt one year. You could, your first idea might not work out. And so having that well of trust and faith to draw from is definitely an advantage. So I would say that you don't succeed in spite of you know, things that maybe take you out of your workday for 5 minutes here and there, or you know, that keep you hungry for a month. You don't succeed in spite of that. You succeed because of it.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's beautiful, mashallah.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of like a shift in mindset that we need to have, because, you know, especially when it comes to building your business, it's like we want it, every minute that we have is so precious to us because there's always so much to do and not enough time to do it. And I think sometimes, you know, if we have this mindset of I'll have to take breaks, I have to go do my prayers, I have to do this, and it's a lot, it takes me time. But when you shift that mindset to no, this is why I'm successful and I'm able to do the things I love because of the time that I spend in prayer and the time that I spend, you know, nurturing my spirituality in that way, then it causes a huge shift towards our attitudes going into those practices. And also it will cause a transformation in our experience that we take away from these practices, because how you go into something, or you know, the perspective that you have, the mindset that you have going into something is usually equal to what you're going to get out of it. Right? If you go into something with a bit of a negative attitude, then you're probably not going to get much out of that experience. But if you go in with a positive attitude and an optimistic mindset, then you're going to get a lot out of the same experience, whereas someone else with a negative attitude might not have gotten very much. So that shift in itself will cause a drastic transformation in the things that you get out of your life and out of your ibadahs, inshallah. So I want to just give a quick shout out to that. Now, Idil, we are going to dive into some Q&A. Is that cool with you? We're going to dive into some audience questions here. Awesome. So we have a few questions in the audience already, guys. If you have questions for Sister Idil, drop them in the comments now. As always, we're going to do some answers. We're going to do some Q&A, some questions and answers right now, and we're going to dive into some of your questions and see if we can get them answered, guys. So if you have questions for Idil in regards to her journey, in regards to speaking, in regards to advocacy, in regards to writing, any of the topics that we've spoken about, or even herself as an entrepreneur, drop them in the comments and we'll go through them one by one, inshallah. And the first one is here with Sister Faye, and it's a really beautiful one that I want to address. Let me pull it up right now. And Sister Faye says, having been able to travel to different countries, what are 3 impactful lessons you got from those experiences which contributed to the woman that you are now? So 3 impactful lessons from your travels that contributed to the woman you are now.
I think through travel, really learn for people that when you travel, it's still there. Okay, good. It was buffering for a little bit.
Yeah, I think it cut off. Yeah, I think you can just restart.
So yeah, no, okay, cool. Yeah, so when I went abroad, at least the way that I travel, it was always important for me to interact with the locals as an equal. I think it's an unfortunate trend where a lot of people from North America or Europe will go to Eastern countries and you know, maybe they'll work there and they call themselves expats, right? Yeah. So they lived in gated communities. They separate themselves from locals. They demand higher salaries. They expect to be treated better than locals. I definitely did not like that trend. I did not go along with that trend at all. I made friends with locals. I treated them as equals. I got to know them. I lived in their country, so I didn't kind of just do lightning trips. So I think that was very important. It helped me to really get to know those countries. And then another lesson, which is a very important one for women, I think, so I'm speaking to the women mainly, is have confidence in your skill level, right? I've seen some things. So I'll give you a little anecdote. It's a fun little anecdote. I was working for an organization in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. Mm-hmm. It was a business and they were opening a social enterprise. And business wasn't going great, so they had hired an American consultant. And it was this guy who came in. He was overly confident, self-confident. And I was trying to push through this deal with a bunch of Canadian companies. They have some of the big companies, SNC Level and different companies have branches in Malaysia in the East. Yeah. So it was a table of these types of guys, and I was having difficulty closing the deal. And I was thinking in my head, I was like, oh, maybe it's because I'm a woman. Let me just get this guy to come with me to the meeting. Hopefully his presence will help me close the deal. And so I brought him to this meeting, and In one meeting, he tanked a deal that was in the works for 10 years.
Oh
Okay.
man.
This this is the hubris. So you have to understand, as a woman, just because you're a woman doesn't mean you are less able, less capable. Sometimes your approach of deference, showing respect for the negotiating party, is the right approach. Sometimes, driving a hard bargain isn't the right way to do it, especially when you're dealing with a lot of egos.
Yeah.
So that was a big lesson. It was incredible to see 10 years go up in one meeting. So that was
Oh,
one experience. And then another experience, what else did I learn abroad? Um, One thing I learned just in my travels is to just go for it. I remember I was in working for a magazine in Jordan, in Amman, Jordan,
yeah.
and a friend of mine just knocked on my door one day, and she said, "Oh, do you want to come to Jerusalem?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's go." And so that weekend, we took a taxi, we crossed the border, and we visited Jerusalem. So I think sometimes it's like, just go for it. You have these opportunities to see different places. Jerusalem is a place of a lesser pilgrimage. So these are opportunities that come in your life. Take precautions always, make smart decisions. But if somebody gives you an opportunity to travel, to do something different, try something new, as long as it's, safe and acceptable to you, go for it. Try new things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. We have a few more questions in store for you from the audience. MashaAllah, lots of questions coming in. Guys, if you have any, now is the time. Drop them in the comments and we'll try to go through as many as possible. So we have another one here from another sister, and this says, how do you balance life, spirituality, and work as an advocate? So how do you balance all three aspects, your life, spirituality, and your work? It's a great question.
It's a very good question. And, I'll be honest, sometimes they are off balance.
Mhm.
That's why I kind of mentioned I'm taking some time, which is convenient because the whole world is kind of taking some time right now with COVID, to press the reset button. Because sometimes one of those aspects of your life will take up more time than the other. I think there's different seasons in our lives. During university, you may be neglecting your friends and your family a bit because you're studying. So sometimes things do get off balance, but I think it's just important to shift the balance back when you can,
Yeah.
and reestablish a bit of balance. But definitely, the different aspects of your life will take priority at different times. For spirituality, it really is the bedrock of everything I do. So if I notice that's getting a bit out of balance, I have to go and find the reset button, press it, and then just really focus on that aspect and reestablishing that. I think that life and work, you have to steal these 10 minutes, these 15 minutes, wherever you can. Whether it's, today I challenge you all to go and find a petition about an issue that you care about on change.org and just sign it. They make it so easy where you can make an account in those websites, and you can literally just sign it so easily with a click of a button. So you just carve out the time. Passion really helps. So identifying what you're passionate about makes it seem less like work. And so that's really how I'm able to do it. I prioritize it. I'm passionate about it, and I make the time.
And that's a big thing, because a lot of people, when you talk to it, no matter what you're talking about, you can say something like, why don't you go to the gym, or why don't you read every day, or why don't you do X, Y, Z? And they'll always say, I don't have the time. But the truth is, they do make the time to watch Netflix every day. So, the difference is, it's not that you don't have the time, it's that you choose not to do it. You don't make the time for it. And I think that's a big distinction. It's making the time for the things that you care about. And that's always a big one. We have another one here from Juman, and this is a great one here. It's with so much injustice and discrimination to fight against in Quebec, and I think not only in Quebec, which is where we currently live in Canada, but all over the world. So with so much injustice and discrimination to fight against, how do you keep staying hopeful and motivated to fight for change when the system is obviously against us as minorities at all levels of the government? So this is a big one.
Mm-hmm. So I started a group on Facebook, which any Muslim women's in the group, you can definitely join.
Awesome.
Women
We'll drop the link.
Organizing Against Islamophobia and Racism.
Awesome.
And so I take hope from the sisters in the group. I think one of the different ways in which I approached my advocacy in Quebec was I didn't want to just build myself up. I also wanted to build other women up, because I easily could have taken all the interviews that were coming through in that group, but I created the group along with a couple of friends, really to mobilize Muslim women who were teachers who were affected by Bill 21. And so they have collectively taken hundreds of interviews. They've built up their speaking skills. They're in the media. The media knows to talk to them. So in this version of the debate, many people have noticed that there's a lot of Muslim women speaking on their own behalf. And, this group contributed to it. A lot of women have mobilized their unions. So they've created groups within their unions to advocate for their rights and for their jobs. So really just empowering other Muslim women has helped me to feel hopeful. If I were to just contemplate our Premier Legault every day, I would feel very depressed. I would say there's no hope. This is how he feels and he's not going to change, and it's just a lost cause. But that's not what I'm contemplating every day. I'm interacting with sisters who are hopeful, who are not jaded, who are young and entering this debate, entering as activists. So that keeps me hopeful.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a big one. I think that's the power of community, right? That's the power of network. And that's why they say that your network is your net worth, because that's really what determines what you achieve in life. And I think that's a big one. So thank you for answering that. We have one more question, inshallah, and then we'll end with that. And this question here is, if you could meet Idil from X years ago, so I guess before you started on this journey, to become an advocate and activist like this, and you could tell her one thing, you could tell Idil one thing to maybe help her on her journey, to inspire her, to keep her focused on the mission and vision, what would that one thing be?
Mm-hmm. I would tell her not to worry so much. I think as a young woman, we often ruminate a lot. We overthink things. It's not always easy to kind of put yourself out there as a young Muslim woman. But I would say, don't worry so much. You definitely, were created by Allah. You have a right to be here. You have a right to make your voice heard. If an issue affects you, you have just as much of a license as anyone else to take up space and to speak about it. So I would say, don't worry so much, and don't really apologize for making yourself heard.
That's amazing, mashallah. Thank you so much, Idil. And honestly, it's been an amazing and insightful interview filled with golden nuggets and topics that we've addressed that I feel needed to be addressed on this podcast, because although it is an entrepreneurship podcast, every single entrepreneur, no matter their background, and yourself, you're an entrepreneur in your own right, brings a certain, value and a certain story that they share, and that brings insights to the audience. And I think that's huge. And that is what makes it so unique. And I want to just thank you again for taking the time to share with us today your story, your journey, and your insights. And if people wanted to connect with you, they wanted to support you, you mentioned your group, and we'll drop a link to that. And we'll also drop all the links that we can. But where can people go to support you, to follow you, to help in the causes that you are trying to fight against?
Right. So my name online is Idil Issa on all platforms, so you can follow me. And I would just say follow my social media channels. I try to post up when I do interviews. I try to include that on my online platforms, although sometimes I miss that. But I would say my wish would just be, as you go forward and you're creating your businesses, don't forget to include a bottom line for social impact. Awesome. And also look at creating businesses that don't harm our community and our world in the first place. Try to make businesses that really help our world and each other.
Yeah, amazing. Beautiful. MashaAllah, guys. So we'll drop all the links in the description. We'll drop it in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, you'll see it in the caption of the episode. And if you haven't already subscribed, guys, make sure you do. And if you haven't joined the Facebook group, also make sure you do. We'll drop a link to that, inshallah. Thank you for listening in. We'll see you next week, guys. Thank you, Idil, for joining us. Take care, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.